666, the number of the demon hunting chapter. But why the Tippany Duck are they called Grey Knights when everyone paints them silver? There is clearly some kind of conspiracy afoot, and we will get to the bottom of it. I'm the voice of Benji, and this is the guide to your first 25 power, 500 points of silver grey unpainted knights. Now, why two different measures of an army's potency? Well, that's because power is for your open and narrative play needs, for the uber cash and or thematic of you, and points are the gauge for matched play. You know, when you want granularity and an even playing field. Now, for those of you that witnessed one of these guides before, you'll know that we aim to sermonise as much layman-friendly information up in your ears as possible, but also forge two divergent paths for you to choose from, for not much reason other than to sample as much of the codex and what your available options are as possible, favouring variety of models over whatever is meta and uber competitive at any given moment. With that said, and bearing in mind that most units in the book have psychic powers, most are able to deep strike onto the battlefield, and most have access to medium range weaponry, we're only able to diverge to a certain degree. However, our best efforts have been made to firstly craft an army that is more interested and devoted to their ranged weaponry, preferring to do some if not most of their killing from the end of a muzzle, and secondly, an army that leans more heavily into the up close and personal carving up of their opponents in the fight phase. First things first then, it's the shooty build, and because we are neatly at the summit of the combat patrol battle size limit, we will also fit our units comfortably into a patrol detachment. Our chosen warlord for today is a Brotherhood champion. The cheapest of the available HQ units is in here somewhat out of necessity because we want to spend our points elsewhere, but rest assured there is no such thing as a Grey Knight unit that's a pushover. Somewhat unusually, our champ is actually a bit of a character hunter. Getting the opportunity to go first in the fight phase is his reward for facing off against an enemy character, which, to be fair, even though it's somewhat situational, ensures that he and his nemesis Full Sword get to go to work. And with 5 attacks, a weapon skill of 2 up, strength 5, AP -3 and 2 damage, work is gonna get done. Troopy Troops next, and this is the point where you understand the eliteness of this faction. A unit of 5 strike squad does not come in cheap considering they're donning some good old fashioned power armour, but do not fret, they more than warrant their cost. Not only have they joined the 2 wound club, the unit itself can harness 1 psychic power each turn. They have a storm bolter as opposed to a bolt gun, and their nemesis Full Sword, as we've just discussed, greatly outshines an Adeptus Chainsword. And that all goes without mentioning the benefits the bulk of the army gets from Masters of the Warp, a standing buff that can be changed up in the psychic phase for whatever happens to be the most beneficial given the game state. And from one sweet unit to another is a Nemesis Dread Knight, taking up a heavy support choice and just bringing the all-round awesomeness. There is no real downside to this mini combat walker. A whopping 13 wounds and a 2 up save, 4 up invuln, fairly swift movement, a handful of strength 12 melee attacks at AP -3 and 2 damage that you can even upgrade, and the fun doesn't even end there because that's when you get to choose their ranged weapon loadout. Picking from 2 of 3 short to medium range options that go from strength 5 to strength 8 and at the very least 6 shots a pop, it simply does not get more beefy than this from a non-vehicle unit. Oh, and the one more thing also is a core unit. That's right, a heavy support with the core keyword. Yes, thank you, I will gladly be the recipient of said core related buffs. Okay, not so much with the Brotherhood champion, but as we grow our army we can only benefit greatly from this. And speaking of vehicles, we opted to bring a Razorback, one of the 2 available dedicated transports in the Codex. This metal box only has a transport capacity of 6 compared to a Rhino's 10, but what it does bring is heavier firepower. Not necessarily mandatory at this size of battle, but look, we're bringing 6 non-Terminator infantry models in the list. Hand, meet glove. Not only that, it's a bit more durable than the Rhino and serves a purpose more than just a taxi for its occupants. You could, if you so desire, take something like Castellan Crow as your warlord and rock him and as many strike squad as you can fit in a Rhino, but we opted for this route instead. And so there you have 8, count them 8 models. You know what these guys need? Cultists or sacrificial lambs or whatever to up the body count. Now normally this would be a hindrance. You could get run over by a mini horde, but everything that could be taken down easily is more or less protected until you get it where you want it to be. And also, don't be fooled by the points total. You can mount more weapons to the Razorback, you'll be giving your Nemesis Dread Knight some ranged weaponry, and you can even upgrade your champion with some wisdom of the prognosticars. As we segue then to the more melee-centric list, once again comfortably lounging itself into a patrol detachment, we've opted this time for our HQ warlord to be a brother captain. In essence, an all-singing, all-dancing lieutenant with all sorts of extra goodies. The obligatory master-crafted Stormbolter brings some extra damage, and the 2-up armour, 4-up invuln gives some security. Plus, we already know what the Nemesis Force Sword brings to the table, and with 5 attacks with it, there is sure to be a small amount of carnage. What a Super Lieutenant also brings is its re-rolling rune rolls of 1 for core units in its 6-inch aura, that's prevalent across the Space Marine landscape. And with the bulk of the infantry units in the book being core, there is plenty of synergy to be had here. I should say at this point, when talking about the 2 available troop choices, that the Brotherhood Terminator Squad is extremely expensive for what it is. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alley, but in comparison to the 2 units of 5 Strike Squad that we're bringing in this here build, it's just no contest. Now, is there a point at which 1 unit of 10 Strike Squad outshines or brings as much to the battlefield as 2 units of 5? Quite possibly, but not at this breakpoint. More units to cap objectives, more psychic powers, and more to counter your opponent. And you definitely need that last point when the Grey Knight's model count is never going to be on the high end. Which ironically brings us to the last unit that fills out this melee heavy build. A unit of 5 Interceptor Squad. Cut from the same sprue as the Strike Squads, and picking up 2 of these boxes gets you a bunch of points for your buck. And believe it or not, this is the only fast attack choice in the whole codex. But with almost everything in the book being able to deep strike, that of course becomes less of an issue. Stat line and loadout wise, these guys are just strike squads with 12-inch movement and the ability to move or fall back unencumbered by engagement range, which means their job is battlefield coverage, plugging points of weakness and helping out where needed. And that, believe it or not, is that. It felt all very sanitary in the end. Plenty of infantry and double the model count of the first list. Albeit any combat patrol battle with only 16 models is still on the low to medium end. What this somewhat vanilla build does though is distill what you're getting with Grey Knights. The high end of eliteness when it comes to Space Marines, and psychic shenanigans in each and every unit. So in terms of seeing the bulk of a game of Warhammer 40k, you can do a lot worse than using this as much as anything as a learning army. What's more, ladies and gentlemen, a low model count will quite often translate into a comparatively lower costing army. And that, at least at this breakpoint, is absolutely true compared to recent faction releases. Of course, you can see that the Dread Knight and the Razorback are the primary reasons for the slightly increased cost in the shooty build. And that all goes without saying Both of them will have 5 leftover strike squad models for use as you expand your forces. Alas, that is the end of this here tale. It's a fairly linear suite of options, at least in terms of data sheets in the codex, but I like to think we're pointing somewhat in 2 different directions. As always, should there be a clear and present want and need for more Grey Knights army building content, we will of course continue this story at the different army size breakpoints, up until it continues to be helpful. But for now, I have been the voice of Benji, and this is him telling you that this video has ended.